My buddy Chip Roy, a good friend of mine, a great member of Congress, he has authored the SAVE Act. The SAVE Act stands for Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act. And Chip Roy and Republicans in the House of Representatives want to tie the SAVE Act to the continuing resolution that must be passed this month to avoid a government shutdown. And the talking point from Democrats is that, well, it's already illegal for illegal aliens and non-citizens to vote in American elections. What the SAVE Act does is it requires states to take affirmative action to make sure non-citizens are not registering to vote. Some states already have that rule. So I live in Georgia, and there's a video that's been circulating of an apartment complex in Norcross, Georgia, where people were going in and getting illegal aliens, not just legal aliens, but illegal aliens to register to vote. It doesn't matter in Georgia, and it freaked people out. I've had to tell them Georgia is a state that requires affirmative confirmation of citizenship before someone can vote. When Brian Kemp, the current governor, was Secretary of State, Georgia passed a law saying that the Secretary of State has to confirm citizenship. The Obama administration refused to cooperate. So Brian Kemp, the then Secretary of State, sued in federal court and got a consent decree whereby the federal government now has to give Georgia access to its database of citizenship. So, for example, in 2022, 1,634 non-citizens in Georgia filled out voter registration forms, and they were rejected because they were not citizens. So because it's an automatic process in Georgia, here's what happens. When you fill out your voter registration form, the Secretary of State's office processes it, and it's run by a Department of Homeland Security database. If it comes back with citizenship, you're registered to vote. If it comes back as non-citizen, your voter registration is rejected. If it comes back as inconclusive, you're notified and you got to provide proof of citizenship to be able to vote. But not every state does that. Illegal immigration is becoming a huge problem, crime and otherwise. In fact, Chip was on with Harris Faulkner on Fox News this morning. I want to play you this conversation. It's not directly about the SAVE Act, but it is implicit in what's going on here. This is Congressman Chip Roy talking to Harris Faulkner on Fox just a little while ago.
You know, look, this is one of those things people say we're trying to exploit for political reasons. The fact is we have a choice to make as a country. Are we going to live in a safe country, or are we going to allow our country to become basically a third world dangerous place? And so what we're seeing right now, just 30 miles from right here, I'm in the Capitol building, out in Manassas, you have an individual who pulled a teenage girl into a car posing as a law enforcement officer, and then he abducted her, right? This is happening in real time across this country. This man was from Peru. He was released in December by this administration into the United States purposefully. This isn't about just open borders. That's almost a misnomer now. This administration is purposely flying people into the United States or taking people from the border and releasing them into the United States, knowing full well that they are dangerous individuals. I was in Aurora, Colorado on Thursday and Friday. I met with the woman who put the video cameras on her door. They weren't apartment videos. This was a woman who needed to secure her own home in the apartment. And she put videos up. And she went out and she called the police. They testified on the ground that they didn't have any manager in the apartment complex. You got radical Democrats, including the governor of Colorado and my colleague Jason Crow, who want to deny that they in fact took over the apartment complex. You had 4 individuals who were arrested. They were released into Texas, into the United States. You had a Peruvian who was released, caught in Buffalo in July, is accused of 23 murders in Peru, is now finally in ICE custody. Tomorrow in the Judiciary Committee, we're going to have Jocelyn Nungary's mom testifying. We're going to have the mom of Kayla Hamilton, who is another woman who was killed in the same county as Rachel Marin. I think we're going to have Rachel Marin's mom. We're going to try to highlight to the American people that they are in danger. And
now, this is how this is relevant to the SAVE Act. The Democrats say this is all overblown and it's not happening. The governor of Colorado, for example, said that these illegal immigrants from Venezuela had not taken over that apartment complex. The local mayor says, oh, yes, they have. Member of city council says, yes, they have. The people who live in the apartment complex say, yes, they have. But the governor comes out and says, no, that's not true. And so the media says, well, the governor says it's not true. How can we believe these other people? They might be Trump supporters. You're not allowed to believe your eyes. It's the same damn thing they did with Joe Biden, where everybody could look at Joe Biden and say there's clearly something wrong here. And the media would say, there's nothing wrong with Joe Biden, you Trump-supporting bigot. Look, he's perfectly fine. He just wandered off stage the way he was supposed to. They're doing the same thing with the election now. As Republicans amp up efforts to tie the SAVE Act to it, I want to read for you the headline at the Associated Press. Non-citizen voting isn't an issue in federal elections, regardless of conspiracy theories. Here's why. And then it includes this paragraph debunking the entire thing, saying that non-citizen voting isn't a problem. It does not happen. Nobody should worry about this. They include this, quote, to be clear, there have been cases of non-citizens casting ballots, but they are extremely rare. Those who have looked into these cases say they often involve legal immigrants who mistakenly believe they have the right to vote. So in other words, it is happening. It is actually happening. Here's what the data says, according to U.S. News & World Report. In 2016, North Carolina audited its election and found 41 legal immigrants had cast ballots despite not yet being citizens. Now, there were 4.8 million votes cast. Those 41 legal immigrants who cast votes did not affect the election, but their votes got counted. A recent study in Arizona found that less than 1% of non-citizens in the state attempted to register, and that even in those instances, the vast majority were believed to be mistakes. The Brennan Center for Justice and Nonpartisan Law and Policy Institute, based in the nation's capital, surveyed 44 election officials located in some of the most populated and immigrant-heavy areas after 2016 and found 30 incidents out of 23.5 million votes cast. So what you're saying is that it happens. Those 30 should not have happened. The media looks at this and says those 30 were insignificant, therefore this isn't a problem. I look at it and say 30 people who should not have cast votes in this country cast votes. And this is the way the media spins it. Here's National Public Radio. The GOP is making false claims about non-citizen voting. It's affecting real voters. William Pritchett is an Alabama voter who got thrown off the rolls. He was one of 3,200 people thrown off the rolls. Alabama said he wasn't a citizen. Yes, he is a citizen. Yes, he should have voted. It's nonsense. And he is used as the epitome of we can't clean up the voter rolls. We can't clean up the voter rolls because we might disqualify actual citizens. And yet even in the NPR story where they're trying to say that this is a big deal, points out that, in fact, non-citizens are voting in the election. From the Heritage Foundation, in Virginia, more than 11,000 aliens were initially listed on the state's voter rolls within the past decade. In New Jersey, at least 616 known aliens ended up in the state's voter registration system just a few years ago. Since 2021, nearly 200 aliens were initially on voter rolls in Arizona. And now what's happening? During the Biden administration, illegal aliens have flooded our border, and in a number of states in local elections, they now allow non-citizen voting. A growing number of progressive enclaves in this country are allowing non-citizens to vote in local elections, which frankly should be prohibited. But under our system of laws and our federal system, the federal government cannot prohibit that. Only the states can prohibit non-citizens voting in state elections. So here's what the SAFE Act does. The SAFE Act reiterates current federal law. Current federal law says it is illegal to vote in an election if you're not a citizen. But what the voter registration forms just tell you is that, hey, you can't do this if you're not a citizen. But there's no active enforcement mechanism to clean up the voting rolls. So this is the synopsis of the SAVE Act that Congressman Roy has authored that is before the House of Representatives that they're thinking of tying to the budget fight. The bill requires individuals to provide documentary proof of U.S. citizenship in order to register to vote in federal elections. Specifically, the bill prohibits states from accepting and processing an application to register to vote in a federal election unless the application presents documentary proof of U.S. citizenship. Right now, in many states, the only thing you have to do is sign the statement affirming you're a citizen. It doesn't matter if you are or you aren't. You sign it and then say, yes, I am. You don't have to have proof. You just sign the statement. You can lie through your teeth. Further, the SAVE Act prohibits states from registering an individual to vote in a federal election unless, at the time the individual applies to register to vote, the individual provides documentary proof of U.S. citizenship and requires states establish an alternative process under which an applicant may submit other evidence to demonstrate U.S. citizenship. Each state, this is the big one, must take affirmative steps on an ongoing basis to establish that only U.S. citizens are registered to vote, which shall include establishing a program to identify individuals who are not U.S. citizens using information supplied by specified sources. That's what Georgia did on its own, and a couple of other states have done, where Georgia now is allowed to contact the Department of Homeland Security database and ping Social Security numbers for citizenship. The bill also allows for a private right of action against an election official who registers an applicant to vote in a federal election who fails to present documentary proof of U.S. citizenship. Therefore, an individual would be able to sue a board of elections for allowing non-citizens to register to vote. The bill also establishes criminal penalties for certain offenses, including registering an applicant to vote in a federal election who fails to present documentary proof of U.S. citizenship. This should be a no-brainer. And what the Democrats have decided to do with the help of the media say this isn't a problem. This isn't a problem, except in every single story from the Associated Press to National Public Radio that says this isn't a problem in federal elections, every single story admits non-citizens are voting in federal elections. It may only be a few, but then we've only gotten to a point right now in this country where Democrats are trying to register illegal aliens to vote in local elections. And some of them are going to fall through the cracks and get registered into the larger election. Mistakes happen. A government that could not stop a former president from being shot in Pennsylvania is not a government capable of blocking a wave of illegal immigrants from voting in our elections. The SAVE Act locks down the system in a way the current legislation does not. The SAVE Act is worth Republicans shutting down the government over. Put Democrats on record saying they're okay with non-citizens voting in our elections. They can't say it doesn't happen because even National Public Radio, in a report trying to say it doesn't happen, had to admit that, yes, it has happened. And because it has happened, it should be stopped. Chip Roy's legislation would stop it. If the Speaker of the House says he's going to fight for it, Republicans in the House and the Senate should be willing to risk a government shutdown on this issue to highlight the fact that, yes, in fact, non-citizens have been voting in federal elections, and that should be stopped.